Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 227, season 5, episode 14. Portion of the week is a portion known as Parshat Bo. It's the third in the second book, the book of Exodus. Our topic this week is decisive leadership, knowing when to act and never looking back. After a 1-week break, we are back with Coaching the Bible. A lot going on here in the Holy Land in Israel with more and more hostage releases over the last week plus, which is great. It's really great to just as a lift to see people coming back, thankfully coming back alive, and continuing to feel like it's strengthening us, strengthening our people here, which is great. Also last week, the reason for the hiatus for the 1-week break was the celebration of my daughter's wedding. To mention her by name because I think apparently I have been a little bit ambiguous about family members and their names. My wife's name is Naomi. My daughter who got married is named Abigail in English. Her husband's name is Mordechai, Morty for short. My other children are JJ, Orly, and Ozzy. For those of you who were counting at home, I believe I've covered everyone. It was an incredible event, experience, celebration, and I'm still hovering in the high of it and still coming down from it. It's a lot, but it was really beautiful and exceptional and amazing, and I'm glad that so many people were able to be there in person to celebrate with us and join us, and hopefully we'll have more opportunities to celebrate in the future. Okay, so knowing when to act and never looking back. A leader's greatest test is knowing when the window for their decision is closing and having the courage to walk through before it slams shut. That is the premise for today. There comes a point in every leader's journey when negotiating ends and contemplation ends and action has to begin. But how do you recognize that moment? And then once you do recognize that moment, how do you go about executing without hesitation? And this is where we're up to with respect to Moses in this week's portion. He's progressed. We're going to unpack Moses. We're going to appreciate that, and we're going to appreciate how that is the case for you as a leader in your business, for you as a leader in your community, for you as a leader in your organization, and for you as a leader in your home. And so we started 2 weeks ago talking about the idea of collaborative courage, where leadership in that point is about resistance and survival. So that's how you have the story of the midwives of Shifra and Puah, of Miriam, of Pharaoh's daughter even, showing incredible courage in the collective and the people's courage in simply just surviving under the stress, pressure, pain, and suffering of Egypt. But that's not enough. Survival is important, but it's not enough to get where you want to go. The second step in that is the one that we skipped last week, but I'll mention briefly here, which is persistence in escalation of that leadership. So escalation is important. Survival is like a baseline. Escalation is taking it up a notch. So you have to move from simply just being to sustained pressure. That's that next piece of the puzzle. Meaning you can take all the blows, you can take all the hits, but now as you're coming back, it has to continue to escalate. And that is what you see Moses after his first meeting with Pharaoh, which maybe doesn't go as well as he wanted to, but the slow escalation through the continued meetings, through the different plagues, through the manner and the tone of speech is an escalation. It's a strategic escalation on the part of Moses, obviously through the direction of God as he works. But that also is not enough. That's step 2. So you go from survival to escalation. And now in this week it's time for action. Because until this point, the people are simply just accepting, right? They're passive on some level. And now they have to move to active. They actually have to do something. And this is the time for final action. And the greatest thing for any leader, the greatest test, is knowing when that moment has arrived, and not simply just knowing that the moment has arrived, because that's not enough, but also stepping through that moment and bringing everyone along the ride. And that is Moses here Whereas decisive leadership in transition, in this mode, in this space, where hesitation is no longer an option. You can be scared, you can be afraid, you can be nervous, you can be stressed, you can have all those things, and you still have to have the courage and, for lack of a better term, the chutzpah to walk through that door. And that's the case for us as well. If you're a business leader, you have to decide in your business, maybe you have to pivot. If you're a community leader, you have to figure out when the dialogue among the different people ends and you have to now implement. If you're an organizational leader, you have to execute that strategy now and go after it, right? So here's a great quote that I think really captures it by someone by the name of Brian Tracy. Decisiveness is a characteristic of high-performing men and women. Almost any decision is better than no decision at all. And so let's dive into what's going on here. So I'll talk about the 3 pillars of decisive leadership. Number 1 is recognizing the moment of no return. Number 2 is escalating with strategic timing. You don't want to act too soon, but you want to get there. And number 3 is executing with absolute clarity. And we'll talk about something that comes right after that. So number 1, let's dive into this first one here, which is recognizing the moment of no return. You have to ask yourself the question, am I still in an escalation process, or is it now time for what we'll call irreversible action? So here is an extraordinary moment in the Bible. Moses walks out from Pharaoh. This is in chapter 11. Why that's extraordinary, I hadn't noticed it before, but I was listening to a lecture earlier in preparation for this, and the person speaking made this comment that it's the first time that the Bible tells us that Moses walks out. So the implication is not that he did it in the normal, regular way, but rather he did it in a different way. So typically speaking, if you're leaving the room and there's a pharaoh or a king or somebody of import in the room, you don't just turn around and walk out. There's a way in which you do that, right? There's a protocol for that. Maybe it's a slight bow, you walk backwards, something of that nature. So here, no one turns their back on Pharaoh. And no one leaves of their own accord. They have to be dismissed. And so, this is the extraordinary moment where the Bible tells us that Moses turned and left. Which tells us that we have moved. Because we have moved from a person who is negotiating, pleading, talking, asking of Pharaoh, and now a person who walks out on Pharaoh, which tells you what he thinks of Pharaoh, and now he's declaring, negotiations are over, it's time to go. You might think it's akin to, say, a president or leader who's now going to war, right? The declaration of war, moving troops, going out on offense against an enemy, that would be an example of that. Maybe that's, D-Day in 1941. Maybe it's someone in business who is done negotiating or done simply thinking about the strategy and now goes and moves in the specific direction. Think Steve Jobs when he returns to Apple, what he cuts and what he keeps and how much he cuts to keep what he kept, right? I know I'm talking in tongues there, but the idea basically to rebuild from scratch. Jobs knew and continued over the course of time in his return to Apple when the decisive moments were to cut bait and move on to the next thing. And so you as the leader have to think now at this moment, take an opportunity to think a moment, where are the red lines, right? Ask yourself this question. What happens in this moment if I do nothing? What happens if I wait? Can you think about situations that you've been in when you have made a decision, okay, and that decision was final? And now as you think about it, were you too early? Were you too late? And so it's important to appreciate this first idea of recognizing that moment of no return. And decision is a great quote from Gordon Graham. Decision is a sharp knife that cuts clean and straight. Indecision, a dull one that hacks and tears and leaves ragged edges behind. So number one is recognizing it. Number two is now escalating with strategic timing. If I act too soon, I lose leverage. If I wait too long, I lose control. And so here is that next level with Moses declaring the final plague in advance, but as a certainty that it's going to happen, right? There's no question that that last plague, after all the other ones, is going to happen. This is beyond simply just escalation. This is now action. And so you get to appreciate that scaling to the point of escalation. You can think about it in the current moment. Perhaps it's when President Trump, having hostages released before his inauguration, or in 1981 when Reagan with the hostages in Iran. There's that strategic idea to gain momentum and not feel that sense of desperation. In sort of what you might step back into American history, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation takes place after a military victory, ensuring momentum and not desperation. This is getting it right in terms of escalating with strategic timing, thinking about how that's going to go. So think about this from the standpoint of yourself to map out when those tipping points are for you with respect to major initiatives. Escalate, escalate, escalate. Boom, there's a moment. Now we're in a different stage. Escalate, escalate, escalate. No, we're not there yet. Okay, let's hold. Escalate, escalate, escalate. Now go to the next level. And then you can do what I saw, which is a really great tool, is pre-mortem planning. We usually think about post-mortem. Let's think about pre-mortem. What if I escalate too soon? What if I wait too long? This goes back a little bit to what we talked about in the first step, but here you're thinking through all the way, like we always like to talk about here, Coaching the Bible, second and third level. What if I escalate too soon? What if I escalate too late? And so after step one, which is recognizing the moment of no return, into step two of escalating now with strategic timing, to step three, executing with absolute clarity. Once I act, I can no longer second guess. I can no longer hedge. I can no longer wait. Moses calls the elders together. He gives them immediate, actionable, and clear instructions with respect to the new Passover rituals. They are on the move. It is not the same anymore. This is the people in action, executing with absolute clarity. Everyone did exactly the same thing in the nation as they prepared to leave. You want to use a political example? Truman deciding to use the bomb. Did he question it? Did he think about it a lot? I'm sure he did. I'm sure he stressed and anxiously thought about it, but then he decided, and he did not hesitate once it was time to go. And so for you as the leader, practice this. I used to do this a lot with students, which was tabletop exercises, put them into the situation, into the spaces where they had to make decisions. They had to be decisive for right or for wrong. They had to make the decisions quickly, no hesitations. Make the decision and go. You can review it later because it's practice, but this is how you go. Is this what happened with Moses? It's absolutely what happened with Moses. It's absolutely what can happen with you as well. And so it's really important that we begin to appreciate how we begin to see this and how we begin to operate in our own spaces, in our own places, as it talks about being decisive in our leadership modes and our leadership methods. Because otherwise, what do you have? You have a jumble. And it's simply not enough. If you look at the follow-through, think about what happens next. Right? Moses then starts to move the people out. He doesn't see Pharaoh any longer. The move is now into a space of real action. The people might be stressed. The people might be nervous. He reinforces. He does all the things we're talking about here and gets to a space where absolutely, absolutely everything is moving in that direction. Are the people afraid? Yes. We know it because we see it later on after they've left. They have all kinds of stresses and pressures and concerns. But he now is building mechanisms. He's now going to put into place systems, traditions, structures that reinforce all of those choices. So this is, after we've talked for weeks and weeks and weeks about indecision and how that goes and people making decisions, here you see decisive leadership in action, no turning back. Once you walk through that door, there's no going back. So you recognize the moment, act decisively, ensure that the decision lasts into the future. Finish it out with a quote. I know I'm talking fast this week. It's totally okay for everybody. From Teddy Roosevelt. In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I look forward to seeing everyone next week as we continue rolling on into the book of Exodus. Take care.